hello and welcome to this Empire versus Orcs and Goblins 2,500 point battle report. I am Brother Danny, and I shall be playing as Orcs and Goblins.
And I am Brother Peachy Carnehan, and I will be playing as the Empire.
No holds barred wag to the finish, is it not?
Indeed it is. Without further ado, I will go forward to the forces I shall be putting forth. Here is the Empire, based around the Dogs of War. I shall be fielding one very large block of spearmen, 38 in total, with 2 detachments, 20 halberdiers and 20 crossbows. I will also be fielding a block of 20 flagellants, another 10 crossbows, a unit of 8 knights and 5 pistoliers. In terms of artillery, I have 2 cannons and a volley gun. For my characters, they are as follows. I have an Empire, a General of the Empire with Sword of Striking, Enchanted Shield and Lackstone. I have a Warrior Priest. He's the one in the top left with the big chest of money there. He's got the white cloak of Ulrich. I have the Griffin Banner, who on my battle standard bearer. The one in the top right corner is my Celestial Wizard Lord. He's got a Wizard Scroll. And the one on the bottom is my Amethyst Wizard, who's got Talisman of Endurance. Both Wizard Lords are level 4. And at the very bottom there in the centre is a Witch Hunter who I gave nothing to but a brace of pistols and my best wishes. The lovely lady on the horse there is the Law of Death. She rolled up Spirit Leech, Soul Blight, the Fate of Buna, and the Purple Sun of Zerus. The Celestial Lord there, who's on a magic carpet, which will be taking the place of a warhorse, is the Law of Heavens. He rolled Harmonic Convergence, Wind Blast, the Curse of the Midnight Wind, and Chain Lightning. I'll pass over to you, Sergeant Danny.
Thank you very much. Now, what you've got here is classic Orcs and Goblins. I've always felt the greenskins. They remind me of the folks back home. So what I've got here is a little mix, a little of all of the different flavours, as it were. We've got some Savage Orc Archers. I don't expect them to do very much, but, you know, they can hurt you in close melee as well as at range. We've got a big pack of Savage Orc Biggins, armed to the teeth with a weapon in either hand. A fairly big block of Boar Boys, which I'll be using to transport the first of my 3 war bosses in, along with the Savage Orc Shaman as well. You'll see there is a big old block of Night Goblin Archers, loaded up with fanatics. We've got a war boss, a Night Goblin war boss on his great cave squig, who'll be leading the charge with some squig hoppers. And we've got a Night Goblin Shaman just for a bit of spell slinging options. The third and final war boss is an Orc, just a standard one, flying in on a Wyvern. And at the back there, I've got a pair of Doom Divers and a Rock Lobber. So that's what I've got in terms of troops. I've not gone for all that much in terms of magical equipment. The Orc on the Wyvern has got the Armour of Gork, hoping to maximise his potential on the charge there, as well as giving a fairly meaty armour save. The Squig Hopper Night Goblin's got the best save of the lot with a Talisman of Preservation and the Obsidian Blade to deal with any pesky armoured Empire Knights or steam tanks that might have happened to turn up. Crown of Command on the Savage Orc Warboss to make sure they're not going anywhere. The Lucky Shrunken Head, of course, making a classic timely appearance with the Savage Orc Shaman. And a Dispel Scroll, because that's what you give your wee goblin. In terms of spells, I'm packing the weaker end of the magic in this fight. I've only got a level 3 Great Shaman and a level 1 wee Night Goblin. He'll be firing off the Vindictive Glare, which is a handy magic missile. Whereas the Savage Orc Shaman will be going for hand-to-hand where he can with Fists of Gork. He's got the Hand of Gork to lob a few units around, and then the Foot of Gork for some good old-fashioned stamping. Back over to you, Brother Danny.
Brother Peachy.
Well, that's right.
You're Danny.
It's the Scotch, you know, it gets you after a while.
Okay, Danny. I deployed as this on the northern end of the field. I tried to get in one corner as much as possible. My large block of spearmen went to the the west of the hills with the crossbows and the halberdiers on either flank. So I was hoping to tuck myself in there nice and tight.
I saw that straight away there, Brother Peachy, and I thought this is a tactic I myself favour, denying one flank and picking off one corner of the field to deploy on. That I respected.
As it turns out, there's quite a lot of my army, and my corner tends to spread over 2/3 of the field, but there you go. So I did what I could. So spearmen in the centre with the crossbows and halberdiers on either side, On the other side of the halberdiers went my smaller unit of crossbows, who were babysitting the celestial wizard on the magic carpet, and on the extreme flank next to them went the cannon. On the other side of the field, next to the crossbows, went my other cannon, my volley gun, and my knights, who were looking after the amethyst wizard. Behind the knights went the flagellants, who I was going to use as a reserve once the knights had charged out away and done their bit. And then over in the extreme west were the pistoliers, who were just going to rampage around, see where they could draw out, see what damage they could do. That was my deployment. Brother Danny.
It's interesting to note that our deployment was done as blind, so neither of us knew where the other army would be. I decided, therefore, to hedge my bets and spread out pretty much right across the field. I've got a gun line at the back with the artillery, with the night goblins, who, even though you can see there they're deployed in big solid blocks, that was not, in fact, as they were on the field. I had them as 2 long lines. No, maybe 3, to maximise the potential for firing should they get close enough to actually hit anything. Same with the Savage Orcs, they were actually in 2 long lines of 10 there. The Wyvern, sensibly, I thought, pack him in behind a hill, not a hill, a building, so that just in case the cannons got the first turn, he had at least a little bit of shelter there. Squig Hoppers in the middle, with the War Boss leading them, and then the 2 big blocks of Savage Orcs to romp along my right-hand flank and rip into the Empire at the first available opportunity.
And now we rolled for who had a first turn. It turned out it was me. I got the first turn, and I decided to play it cautious and not advance too far. So I held everything back. I didn't actually move a single thing. This turned out to be... It was a quick movement turn, I'll say that, but it turned out to be a bit of a problem when I came to the magic phase, as I realised that all my death spells were out of range, and I could have done with nudging my knights forward an inch or 2. However, this turned out to be not to be a problem, because I still had the purple sun of Xurus, so I could throw all my dice at that and send it straight forward into the low initiative orcs. And so that's what I did. I managed to cast that purple sun irresistibly, so there was absolutely nothing he could do. The smaller purple sun shot off and landed halfway across the table. However, it was an irresistible cast, and 3 of my knights subsequently died when the wizard exploded. This proved to be a bit distressing for the rest of the knights, and they decided to turn away and run off the edge of the battlefield. As you can see, they would have been all right, but the flagellants were in their way, and they bounced through them and straight off the table. So that was my magic phase. I cast a small purple sun and managed to lose a wizard lord and my unit of knights in the process. It was probably not my finest hour.
There was nothing for me to do there but applaud.
Now it came to shooting. I took aim at the rock lobber and managed to miss it entirely and land on the Savage Orc archers. Now, I took only one of the Savage Orc archers because they were spread out so thin. However, I had a second cannon, and that one hit the rock lobber absolutely square. It was a lovely shot, and after it hit it, it caused its maximum amount of damage, 3 wounds. Lovely. However, we forgot to mention that the rock lobber was being crewed with a bully, which meant it had 4 wounds, so the thing was still on the table, and there was nothing I could do about it.
Once again, I could do nothing about that but applaud.
And that was the end of my go, which I will say didn't fill me with a lot of confidence.
Well, on the other side of the field, Brother Peachy, I couldn't say I was feeling much happier about it either. I'd been lucky with the rock lobber. That extra 10 points for the orc bully had proved well worth it, otherwise I'd have lost the thing without firing a single stone. Now, as typical with the Orcs and Goblin army, you have to roll for a bit of infighting first, and my animosity rolls were very bad here. Both the Savage Orc units immediately got into a good old headbutting competition, and they wouldn't be going anywhere or doing anything for the entire first turn. Highly disappointed, I have to say, because there was that big purple sun sitting right in front of me, so I didn't particularly want to rush into it. Elsewhere, I romped everything forward pretty much as I could. The Savage Orc archers and the Night Goblin archers ran forward. The Squig Hoppers and the Wyvern ran into the middle of the field to provide something for the Empire men to shoot at and run distraction for the rest of the team. But that was it for me. Now, I cheated a bit in the next bit. I didn't realise until later, but of course, the Savage Orc Shaman can't cast anything while he's OCT. So, casting Hand of Gork on the Savage Orcs, as this diagram neatly shows, and hurling them forward onto the flank of the Purple Sun was a wee bit out of the order, but neither of us caught this. We corrected it later on in the battle instead. There wasn't much else going on in the magic phase. I tried to lob off a Vindictive Glare, but that got dispelled, so we went on to shooting. Now, I've never used Orcs and Goblins as a gunline before. and I was fully expecting to get a whole bunch of misfires and not really do much damage. As it happened, though, these Doom Divers were a wee bit tasty. I thought I'd better try and do a bit of counter battery fire, try and take out the enemy cannons. And I immediately started by nicking a wound off one of them with a Doom Diver. The second Doom Diver, I think, just crash landed into the middle of nothing and wasted his life. And the Rock Lobber, from what I recall, would that have gone wild, brother?
I believe it did miss everything, yes. The Doom Divers were very accurate. With their big wingspan, they had to really miss very badly to not hit anything. Right, it was my turn 2. I decided I would actually get moving for once, and so I moved my Pistoliers up into these ruins here. One of them just close enough to lure out the fanatics, so they could get drawn out early before they did any damage to my packed ranks.
And to my utter delight, not a single one of the fanatics connected with a wee horseman.
They all rolled low, and so they were stacked there right in front of his line, and my boys were still intact. So that was quite nice. That was it for movement. Again, I was keeping it nice and static. I tried to cast a bit more magic. Having only one wizard left, luckily he was still a wizard lord. I cast Harmonic Convergence on my unit of crossbowmen because I had this big wyvern right in front of me, and I reckoned I could give it a few bolts. And then it came to shooting. I thought, I nearly got the rock lobber last time. I better finish it off this time. So I shot it with my cannon. It did hit, and I rolled a 1, and it didn't do any damage. But no fear, I do have a second cannon, so I shot with that one, and that one didn't hurt either. So this rock lobber has now absorbed 3 cannonballs, and the bloody thing still hasn't been destroyed. So that was it for my artillery. Not greatly successful, and that rock lobber is still there lobbing rocks. However, I got a bit better with my shooting, although it did take my entire gun line to do this amount of damage. I had 20 crossbows with Harmonic Convergence rerolling, and I had another 10 crossbows on the other side, and I had the massed fire of my volley gun, and I threw everything at the wyvern, doing 3 wounds. So the thing was still standing on its last wound, and I think I may have also pipped a wound off the Orc war boss there, although his armour of Gork did make him exceptionally tough. So things are looking quite hairy for me at the moment. Over to you, Danny.
Well, hairy you might say, but I was filled with glee shortly in the movement when we got to the compulsory bit, and the fanatics managed to go pretty much all in the right direction. One of them headed back for home, but the other 2 went straight through the Pistoliers and tore them to shreds.
Although in the process of tearing them to shreds, they also tore into each other, so that entire edge of the board was wiped clean.
Well, that did it for me. That's 25 points per fanatic against whatever it was for the Pistoliers. Good for them. But elsewhere, yep, we just headed for the enemy as quick as we could. Now, something must have happened to that orc there.
You declared a charge on my crossbows.
Ripping towards your crossbowmen, and his wyvern got killed from out underneath him, which wasn't great because it left the war boss limping along all by himself towards really quite a lot of people.
And unsurprisingly, without a big flying creature to stand on, he failed the charge quite badly.
Didn't go that far. Well, that's foot troops for you. Slow, cumbersome, but I could still screen him with a bunch of squigs instead, so that was nice. There you got the... that's right, there was no purple sunlight.
You dispelled it in your magic phase.
The last one, that's the fella. So the Savage Orcs were descending in a big pack towards the flank, as I wanted them, and I had a kind of screening advance of archers across the board. The Night Goblins shot the wee fella, the fanatic in front of them, to bits before he could do them any harm. And then a combination of rock lobbing and doom diving took out the first cannon on the flank.
1-0 to the Greenskin Artillery. So now it was my turn 3. I decided to be a bit aggressive. You'd hopped your hoppers right in front of me, and I thought now's the time to take them out and maybe have a pop at the Warlord in the overrun. So that's what I did. I declared a charge against the Squig hoppers and the Goblin war boss on the Great Cave Squig with both my halberdiers and the Spearmen. And
now what sensibly I should have done would be run away, of course, and left them all flailing about in midair, but you can't do that with Squig hoppers. They're stubborn brutes, and they, because they've got compulsory movement types, they can't do anything but just sit there if somebody charges into them.
And speaking of things you can't control, you notice my flagellants have also moved up. I think that was because they failed their frenzy roll and made a very long-range charge at the poor boys, which they subsequently also failed. So they're very close to them now and looking in a nasty position to get charged. But I have connected with my main units against the Squig hoppers, and I'm hoping to tear through them quite quickly. I did a bit of shooting in. I believe this was my volley gun going to work. I decided I would target everything I had against the boar boys. Once again, this was cannon, volley gun, and my crossbows. and shot everything I had. The lucky shrunken head did come into play here, causing a lot of nice saves. Only 3 orcs were killed, so that's not even a back rank so far. So those boar boys are still looking quite formidable.
They're a tough wee unit, and I was very pleased with their performance in absorbing the crossbow bolts, both in this turn and in subsequent.
Indeed. Right, now comes the first turn of combat. I declared a challenge, or rather I accepted a challenge from the Goblin War Boss with my Spearman. My Spearman champion accepted that challenge as I wanted to take him out of the action. I managed to kill all 6 of the hoppers, although my Spearman champion was felled quite easily by the Night Goblin War Boss. However, I hadn't realised that we was all initiative the same, so the squigs would get to fight back at me.
They certainly did, and they did a very good job of it too, did they not, Brother Peachy?
They did. They took out 5 of my halberdiers, and they took out my pole witch hunter, who happened to be on the corner of the unit. So actually, the combat was a lot closer than I'd thought. However, my Griffin banner, which doubled my rank bonus, won me through. So I did actually manage to frighten off the squig hopper. However, the Griffin banner also means you can't pursue, which is perhaps something I should have thought of when I thought I could pursue into the war boss. So luckily it did win me the combat, but unfortunately I was stuck there like 10 o'clock half struck and couldn't do a thing about it. But I'd routed the Goblin War Boss and I'd killed a squig, so it wasn't all bad.
You can see there those wee animosity markers already. Once again, all the archers got stuck in, but this time they got stuck into each other. That was a bit annoying. I was hoping they were going to be swarming up into the buildings and getting ready to pepper the Empire flank with their arrows. I'd just have to wait. What was even worse was the savage orc boar boys, ready to crash into that flagellant unit, didn't. Instead, they decided to have a little squabble about who was really the war boss and sat there fighting amongst each other. So it was just the savage orcs creeping up. And this was the point that we realised I should never have cast them up with that hand of Gork earlier, so we actually moved them even less than we could have. But I did manage to declare a charge. Not only did the squig hopper rally himself, turn around and get ready to receive any charges, but the Orc War Boss managed a long-range charge into the detachment of halberdiers there. I figured I could take them, and I was right, but I should have declared a wag on the way in, which I forgot. Shooting, again, was pretty good. Those Doom Divers and the Rock Lobber between them ripped up a crossbow unit, taking out was it half of them? Or
the first Doom Diver took out 4 of them, and I believe the second Doom Diver took out the rest of them. The Celestial Wizard they were looking after was very likely to survive without a scratch on him.
Lucky man, but I suppose a chap who can control the heavens has less to fear from missile fire than others, perhaps.
True, although I was getting rather afraid of things that would be raining down on my head from now on.
Well, the combat went pretty much as we expected. The Orc War Boss, combined with his impact hits and his massive strength, the halberdiers in no short order. Well, he did take a wound himself on the way in, though, and that left him on his last one, so it was looking a wee bit hairy for him, especially with that whacking great pack of spearmen right next to him.
However, I realised that the spearman was actually too close to get a line of sight on the war boss, so the halberdiers would be on their own. I should mention the reason they managed to hold after such crippling losses was they were a detachment and still could use the general's stubbornness, so they was all right for the meantime. However, I couldn't charge in to help them. What I could do was have a go at the war boss on the squig who just rallied, so I decided to declare a charge against him, and he couldn't run away either, so we were stuck in there. Elsewhere, my flagellants once again failed their frenzy test and charged in, and once again failed to charge. So they were still having their standoff against the very slow-moving pack of boar boys. As a final bit of movement, my wizard, having lost all his crossbowmen, went over to the bigger pack of crossbowmen so they could protect him instead. Right, time for a bit of shooting. My only remaining cannon distinguished itself by taking aim and blowing itself up. So the guns were sparked before the goblins had even had a chance to shoot at it. Elsewhere, the volley gun had a bit of better luck, as did the crossbows. We managed to take 4 more boar boys out of the picture. So we was whittling them down, but it looks very likely they're going to come in on my flagellants unless they go and fail another animosity test. So shooting, not great. I've lost another cannon, and things are now looking tight on this side. In the combat, the Night Goblin War Boss, I believe, declared a challenge. I didn't want to take this with my my Empire General, since I was relying on him to keep the lines in order. So I stepped up with my Standard Bearer. Now, he's got a pretty good armor save, and I reckon he could hold up quite nicely. What I'd forgotten was that the Night Goblin War Boss had a magic weapon that didn't use armor saves. So he was chopped down in no short order. So I'd lost my Griffin banner. However, the sheer weight of numbers was enough to win me the combat and chase away the Night Goblin war boss. Ironically, I could have actually pursued. Now, I didn't have a Griffin banner because the banner bearer was dead, but I chose instead to reform and face the back of the war boss because I reckon I could have had him if I charged in the rear. And meanwhile, the combat with the war boss, he was chopping down my my halberdiers like fun, but he only lost 2 of them this time because he didn't have a charge and he whiffed quite a lot of the attacks. So they managed to hold in there, once again using the general's leadership, but there was reinforcements was on their way. How about you, Danny?
It was looking like there was going to be a bit of an Orc Warboss sandwich going on in the near future. So I was hoping to maybe get the Savage Orcs and the Night Goblins in range to do a bit of shooting. The Savage Orcs instead decided they were still angry at the Night Goblins and sat there calling names and shouting at them. The Night Goblins hurried forward a bit, so I just about got them in range to do a bit of shooting. Magic, now this was a good turn, because I managed to get a good-sized Footogork that landed right in the middle of that Spearman regiment, and my poor blind opponent let it through.
I did actually have a Dispel Scroll, and it wasn't cast as 3, but I thought maybe I'll keep the Dispel Scroll in case I really need it. And when that foot landed right in the middle of the regiment, I thought maybe I really needed it now. Yeah, 16 spearmen dead and another wound off my general.
Elsewhere, we managed to get, it was either the Rock Lobber or the Doom Divers picked off that volley gun, or between the lot of them, and then we even started picking off the other cross as a goblin crashing headlong into the lot of them. Brave, plucky wee greenskin that he was. Now we finally managed to get our fight on over here after the world's longest and slowest game of chicken between the two frenzied units. It was a pretty bloody affair on both sides. The Savage Orcs ploughed in. They had to wait a little bit because they're slow chaps for all their ferocity. The Flagellants got first bat with their flails. So we lost a couple of boar boys off the front rank, and both the characters there, the Savage Orc Warboss and the Great Shaman, both took a wound. But after that, it was greenskins all the way.
Yeah, that's right. I lost 13 Flagellants. Because actually both units were in. I mean, they were going corner to corner with the boys as well as the boar boys. Luckily, the Flagellants were unbreakable, so that unit was going to hold for one more turn. Probably just one more turn, though, looking at the size of what was left.
Elsewhere, the Orc Warboss had another bit of a whiff.
That warboss still had one last wound in there, but he did kill 2 halberdiers who nonetheless held. The greatly truncated spearmen were coming in at the back. And that's exactly what I did in the next turn. So I charged into the rear of the warboss, made it easily, and then the only other movement was to shoot my my wizard halfway up the board. I didn't fancy sticking around with the crossbows, not with the orcs barreling down on him and the artillery coming down him. I thought he'd better take his chances in the open. So I did just that, and in the magic phase, I was in close enough range to try a bit of chain lightning, which I successfully cast on one Doom Diver, which hit and then bounced off into the second one. However, the artillery's lack was still holding nicely, and only one wound was caused apiece, so the Doom Divers were still very much in action. Elsewhere in the combat, the Spearmen managed to pile into the Orc Warboss, and between all of them, they'd managed to do just enough wounds to take that last wound off the very tough Warboss, and he was out of the picture. So that was something going in my favour now. In combat, so after successful, I reformed both units, and they were now looking down at the Night Goblins. And reduced that they were, I reckoned I had not a bad chance of taking them out. So that was all something for me. Back on the other side of the board, there was the Flagellants. I think they killed half their number just getting warmed up, and then the rest of them was quickly taken out by the boar boys. I didn't do any damage in return. However, the boar boys managed to leave one single Flagellant left alive there, so that was quite nice.
It was a disappointing result, that. If I'd have managed to take out that last fellow, we'd have been looking at being able to rip into the last Empire along with what was left on the back ranks there. But no, we're just going to have to spend another turn trampling one solitary lunatic into the dirt. Which we did. Here you can see the results of the shooting phase and the magic between them. We got a vindictive glare in from the Night Goblin Shaman as well. There's quite a lot of shooting from the Night Goblin archers. And between the lot of it, we pretty much picked that spear unit down to a bare minimum.
Yeah, both Doom Divers smacked it, as did possibly the Rock Lobber and the Vindictive Glare and the Archers. So when the dust had settled, I had 2 spearmen left, plus a general on with 1 wound off and a warrior priest with 1 wound off. So that was fairly devastating.
Elsewhere, as you might imagine, the combat phase wasn't exactly a tie.
No, so the 2 Orc units were left with nowhere to go, since their opponent had the good grace to kill himself before things proceeded.
There he is, dead as a doornail.
Right, it is my sixth and final turn, and I reckon it was time for a bit of heroics here. So I decided I'd declare a charge against the Night Goblin Horde. As we mentioned, they're in horde formation, so I reckoned if I could get in and do a bit of damage, maybe I could break them. However, because they was in horde formation, they could shoot quite a lot of arrows at me. So in making the charge, both spearmen were shot, as was the warrior priest, as was a wound off the general. So what I actually had making the charge was my very expensive general on a single solitary wound taken on the Night Goblins.
He's just one man full of arrows. What harm could he possibly do us?
Absolutely, he'd have to be a hero to do that. And over with my Wizard Lord, who was managing to survive somehow, he swept up on his magic carpet to get a better range of chain lightning on the war boss on the squig, who is now fleeing again. He's bouncing towards the rear end, and he's in a nice little grouping with a Doom Diver, so I'm hoping to get some chain lightning off there. And I did just that. It struck the Goblin war boss and frazzled him, so he was dead. But it didn't bounce off into either Doom Divers, or it didn't do enough damage when it did bounce off. So that was it for my magic phase. I think with my remaining spells, I threw everything I had at this combat, which was all I had going for me. Harmonic Convergence on the General, Curse of the Midnight Wind on the Night Goblins. So I was giving my General every possible chance to, well, just survive the round. Over on shooting, what was left of my crossbows took aim at the Boar Boys and took another one of them out. Sadly, no amount of shooting was going to cause a panic test, as they was all frenzied and immune to psychology. And comes to the combat. I declared a challenge, and the Night Goblin champion stepped up to take him on. However, I managed to beat him in no short order. So that's one wound off and 2 points of overkill. So no damage was done to my general, and with not enough ranks to absorb his charge and damage, they was losing the combat. However, they did manage to roll very well on leadership, and they stuck. So they're going through to the final round.
And what a round it was. You can see the Savage Orcs finally getting let loose and charging in against that crossbow unit. Now, we lost a couple of them on the way in. No lucky shrunken head for these chaps, but a face full of crossbow bolts instead. But a mere 3 out of the 20-odd, 30-odd that they had still left. The Savage Orcs came romping forward out of the building because they failed their frenzy test and decided they might want to charge rather than doing something useful like shoot. But that was, not the worst. And there you can see the my massed artillery still all firing away. Managed to take out those two of the last halberdiers. The last one had had enough at that point, and he went back home for his holidays.
That was particularly disappointing because that halberdier was, being a detachment, was the last of all my units of spearmen and crossbows and halberds. So if he'd stuck around, I could have saved a unit. But no, he decided to leg it. And to be honest, I can't really blame him.
I always feel for the poor bloody infantry in these games. They always take the rough end of the stick, which is what you see over here, a rough end of many sticks being applied quite vigorously to the crossbows. We duffed up 3 of them, and the rest legged it. The Savage Orcs chased them down, killed a lot of them.
However, back to the main heroics, I believe there was no one left to hide now, so the general had to take on all the goblins by himself. And he did that. He killed 3 of them, and despite the whole unit fighting him back, not one of them managed to land a blow through his armor. So they once again lost the combat, and they decided to run for it. So this lone hero ran them all down and killed a lot of them. So that was quite a nice way to end the combat. And with nothing further to do, I believe that was the game.
It was a pretty bloody game, but the Orcs and Goblins had it. That artillery line performed splendidly.
Yes, indeed. It took me apart, despite the fact that the Boar Boys and the infantry took a very long time to get to my gun line. And had I been maybe a bit more cautious and a bit more sensible with magic and just a little bit luckier with my cannons, I might have been able to do some damage on them. For my part, despite some appalling animosity rolls all the way through, I'd been very lucky, and I'd had a few nice results with spells and shooting as well. But all in all, a very enjoyable game. It certainly was. First one back in 8th edition after a while, and it's just as good as it always was for nice big battles.
Oh, him there with a 5.5 hat size has the makings of a bloody hero.